Me and my old buddy David Duke.
Okay.
That's for the record.
Okay. You raised
No, but
that.
of all the guys
Okay.
talking crap about David Duke, I'm the only one to have debated him. And I kicked his butt pretty good, too, years ago, back in the 90s.
Well, we can agree we don't need to follow his footsteps, and I'm glad you kicked the hell out of him. Niger Innis, we'd like to talk to you about racism.
Yes.
Could you tell us what racism is?
Racism, unfortunately, is just a part of the human condition, where individuals find ways to discriminate against one another because of race or ethnicity or religion. I mean, it's just a general state of the human condition. And let me say this, because race is something that here in the United States is something we always talk about. There is no country on the face of this earth that has come as far as the United States has come in a relatively short period of time to do its best to eradicate racism from the human condition. It's impossible to eradicate it completely, but we are so sensitive about it. Some might say a little overly sensitive about racism. We desperately don't want to be racist. I think Britt Hume once said, and says all the time actually, that there is no word that has more power in the United States than racism. Because no one wants to be called a racist, no one wants to be considered a racist, certainly among whites.
If you conclude that somebody has bad character because they're black, that would be racism, right?
No, well, if you conclude that somebody has bad character and they happen to be black, that's not racism. But if you conclude without knowing anything else about that particular individual that they have bad character because they are black or Latino or Irish or Jewish, that would be racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry.
So if you conclude somebody has bad character because they're white, that would also be racism?
Absolutely. In fact, that is a racism that unfortunately, to be quite blunt with you, a lot of minorities have kind of gotten a pass. Because of the history of our country in the bad old days, you now have a situation where minorities can be occasionally racist and not be called on it. And that's unfortunate, because racism is a two-way street. It swings both ways, and the most dangerous type of racism is a type of racism where there's a political correct chill that prevents people from telling the truth and exposing it.
So if you won't let someone into your club or organization because they're black, that would also be racism, right?
It is racism. I will say there's a fine line, though, between cultural affinity and ethnic pride. I mean, for example...
but if you don't let them in your club because they're black, would that be racism?
Yes, but, okay, here's the caveat. The caveat is there are times like there's... the St. Paddy's Day Parade, which is clearly an Irish focus. Now, they don't block blacks from participating, or Italians or Jews from participating in the St. Paddy's Parade, but it is clearly an ethnic-focused, semi-religious endeavor, an event, and something that people should be proud of. I grew up in Harlem, New York.
It's not a club, right? It's just a parade.
It's not a club.
So if you won't let someone in your club or organization because they're white, that would also be racism.
Absolutely, it would be racism. And what I would say, though...
This is what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
So
I knew there was a trick there coming.
No, there's no trick. It's just I'm just trying to articulate a definition of racism to see if you agree or disagree.
Fair enough.
If you use race as a factor to evaluate somebody's character or merits to enter into your organization,
Right.
instead of focusing on their actions,
Right.
that would be racism.
I would agree with that in general. I mean, obviously, there could be exceptions to the general rule, but I agree with the rule generally.
Well, what would be an exception? Because I'm not conscious of any.
Here's an exception. How about the so-called issue of racial profiling, okay? I met with Bernie Kerik back in early 2000s when he was the police chief for Rudy Giuliani right after 9/11. And the issue of racial profiling was coming up, and we had a vigorous discussion about it. And he said, Niger, it's not a question of racial profiling, it's a question of criminal profiling. And if you're in a particular community or a particular jurisdiction, a city, a town, a particular area, where there is a particular type of profile that includes race or ethnicity or hair length or style of dress as a factor, that is not bigotry to include it among the profile.
Yeah, but they use that to see who they're going to stop or not stop, but they don't put anybody in jail because they're black.
No, they don't. But unfortunately, though, and here's what I said to Bernie at the time, and I said to others, which is that I have no problem with criminal profiling. What I have a problem with is the courtesy not demonstrated when a police officer, from time to time, and of course I'm talking isolated incidents, when a police officer realizes that, hey, this is not the person that I had profiled. I was right to stop him. I was right to be concerned. But now that I realize that I was wrong and this person is innocent, that law enforcement official should bend over backwards to say, you are not the person. We apologize. Please have a great day. And that does not happen enough. You know.
Right. So what we want to do is judge people on their actions, on their
Content
character,
and
like Martin Luther King said.
Right.
So,
By the way, there was somebody even before Martin Luther King.
I'm sure you know the history better than I do.
No, but you're gonna like this, and your listeners need to know this. He does not get enough credit for this. The Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which of course embedded segregation in our country as a law of the land, certainly in the South. There was a dissent in that famous case. That dissent was Justice Harlan. And Justice Harlan's dissent was specifically that the Constitution does not recognize color. The Constitution does not recognize caste. The Constitution is a color-blind document. And that was 60 years before Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
Right. Not only the Constitution, but laws in general should be
Equality
colorblind.
before the law. That's right.
Equality before the law. Race shouldn't be a factor, or shouldn't be referred to.
Or gender, for that matter.
Or gender, right. Or religion, or
That's
stuff.
right. That's right.
So, can a white congressman become a voting member of the Congressional Black Caucus?
I believe, actually, one guy from Tennessee tried that. A gentleman, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he's Jewish, that ran in a district and won in a district that is predominantly African American, and he actually tried to become a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And let me tell you something, if I were a voting member of the caucus, I would have voted him in, because the fact is he represents a constituency that is black. You know,
Right.
so
He could. They wouldn't let him in, right?
I don't think they did. I don't
Yeah,
think they did,
because-
which I think was a mistake.
Because they have a rule that you have to be black.
What-
That's the rule, according
what-
to.
what-
I've interviewed them, and that's what they told me.
And I think that's a little too rigid. Okay, I think that, you know, you are successful. The beauty about American politics is that it's a plus game. Okay, you always want to add people to what it is you're trying to
To
get
be
done.
inclusive.
You want to be inclusive. You want to have a broad coalition where possible, presuming that everybody's on the same page. If you're on the same page with your interests and your constituents' interests, then why not bring somebody along if they're going to further your interest and goals?
So is the Congressional Black Caucus racist?
Here's the hook line. No, see, I think that's why it's important to distinguish between racism and ethnic pride or ethnic focus. I would not say, like I said before, I would not say that the St. Patrick's Day parade is racist. I would not say. I grew up in Harlem, New York. You know, and we used to have.
They let everybody, all the black people, participate if they want. But the Congressional Black Caucus won't let you be a voting member of their group unless you're black.
I would not say that. I would say that practice is indeed racism and is short-sighted on their part. I wouldn't say that the Congressional Black Caucus is racist as a whole.
Okay,
Even though I have all kinds of problems with the Congressional Black Caucus.
That rule that they're implementing is racist.
That rule is exclusionary.
Like you said in the beginning of the interview, if you won't let somebody into your club organization because they're white, that would be racism.
I would agree with that.
So when a university uses race as a factor to give people extra points when they decide whether to let them enter into the university, would that also be a racist practice?
For 25 years, I've been saying that affirmative action needs to be dramatically changed, that you need to have a character quotient, okay? We need to remove elements such as gender, such as race. That people should not just get extra points for that and have a certain advantage or certain presumption of virtue because of their gender or because of their race. I do believe that you can see a particular community, say, you know, inner city Detroit or Harlem or Appalachia, West Virginia, okay, or a Vietnamese immigrant, you know, that had to go through certain types of struggles that elites of whatever color Okay, those who had the privilege, like I did. I grew up in a middle class household. I should not have an advantage over some white kid from Appalachia or some Vietnamese immigrant.
Right. The issue is the merits, the facts, not the race.
There should be a new character quotient when it comes to affirmative action, a character quotient when it comes to affirmative action that includes a variety of different factors, but socioeconomic disadvantages that might exist for particular individuals.
So essentially, affirmative action is a racist policy because they're focusing on the race of the people that they're evaluating instead of on their actions, right?
Affirmative action has been, quite frankly, warped in terms of its original intent. The original intent was very specifically intended to be race-based because of the history of what happened to black Americans in the country. Over time, the progressives, just like they do with virtually everything, they get engaged, embedded in a particular function, and then they expand the mission and expand the uses of that particular remedy for a specific issue for a bunch of things that it did not include. It was not supposed to be gender. It was not supposed to be sexual orientation. It was not supposed to include a variety of different minorities. It was attempted originally to address the specific actions that occurred against black Americans after slavery, after Reconstruction.
But we don't want that in the law. We want a colorblind law, and so we don't want them to be focusing on the race of the people, but more on the merits.
At this point in time, it's archaic. At this point in time, it doesn't make any sense. First of all, you have blacks now that are in the country from all parts of the world. You have blacks from the Caribbean, from Central and South America, from Africa. They do not have the same history that black Americans have. So it's just faulty. And at this point, we are such a multiracial, multi-ethnic society. And the strength of us as a country is that we focus on the individual and the character of the individual as opposed to their particular race or ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera.
Amen. Thank you, Niger.
My pleasure.
How you doing? Nice to see you.
Last time I saw you, I was in Seattle.